WWE is not the most consistent form of entertainment that people can watch. An episode of Raw can go from amazing one week to one of the worst of all time the next. But the makings behind these inconsistencies came from everything else WWE does, booking to roster management. Now more than ever, it seems the sense in WWE programming and their actions has been eroding. This is Wrestling Hub, and these are the 10 things in WWE that make no sense. Before we get into the rest of the video, make sure you subscribe to Wrestling Hub and turn on all notifications to stay up to date with everything in the world of pro wrestling. We have to start with the most pressing issue in wrestling for over a year now, and that is job security in WWE. After years of building one of the most bloated talent rosters of all time, WWE started trimming fat in a massive way. They released over 200 employees since April 2020. WWE's stock portfolio proves they are as profitable as they ever have been, yet they keep releasing fan favorites. From trusted veterans like Zack Ryder and Heath Slater to high-value stars like Braun Strowman, the method to their madness is tricky to pin down. There are many odd roster cuts that make no sense, which lead us to our second point. We went from the women's revolution to WWE's women's roster looking as threadbare as it has in 7 years. 7 women's wrestlers have been released in 2021. The SmackDown women's roster in particular has been struggling. They had a historic title reign by Bayley, but that is only because the only real challenger she ever had was Sasha Banks. Current champion Bianca Belair's reign has been relatively forgettable due to a lack of believable competition. The women's tag belts were supposed to give an avenue to more talented wrestlers to get a featured spotlight, but they only have 3 genuine tag teams now, and the old cop-out of the titles being defended on NXT can't work as the brand has its own belts. NXT has actually built a fantastic women's roster, but most of the talent need more time in developmental and can't be called up to plug main roster holes. This concern has been there for so long, it's hard to remember a time when WWE were effectively booking long-term angles. Their most recent foray into this was the near 2-year build between Sasha Banks and Bayley. Outside that, stories seem to be booked week to week or at best pay-per-view to pay-per-view. WWE just might be the company that is appealing to the casual fan's smaller attention span, but stories seem rotational. Whenever WWE do try their hand at proper storytelling, they muddle it up with overcomplicated elements like the Mysterio-Rollins feud. This has been WWE's Achilles heel for a while, and still seems to be something they cannot get right. WWE just stopped trying to give ratings a boost by manufacturing drafts. The company realized how important inter-brand competition can be when they had the brand expansion after WCW's demise. However, the modern roster cannot handle it. They did remove the concept for 5 years from 2011 to 2016, but brought it back when their roster got bloated. 2016 was the only year that brands felt different. WWE have the 2021 draft scheduled for August 30th and September 3rd, their 7th draft or roster reassignment since the 2016 split. These same wrestlers keep being moved from brand to brand, and the excitement of draft night from the pre-2011 days is gone. The concept of brand loyalty seems hard to fathom when WWE have been bending over backwards to find ways to cheat the system, including the much maligned wildcard concept from a couple of years ago. WWE needs to let the roster they create settle in and have genuine brand animosity, rather than trying to plug the ratings by doing an insignificant draft. Another year of wondering what happened to Bray Wyatt. It seems fans have been in this cycle since 2014 when John Cena effectively killed the Wyatt family momentum, beating Bray at WrestleMania. Wyatt's first title reign in 2017 was ended by Randy Orton, who was a transitional champ for Jinder Mahal. 2019 seemed different, with The Fiend exploding as the most interesting character. He had a good run and became champion, but has been a victim of bad booking since the beginning, booking that peaked at this year's WrestleMania. Wyatt was tormented by old foe Randy Orton and was supposed to get his revenge for WrestleMania 34 this year. Obviously, WWE wasn't going to let that happen, and after an intriguing build, Orton won and sent Wyatt off programming. Once again, the Honda star of the last few years has disappeared to retool and return. We've already criticized the women's division, but WWE's use of Alexa Bliss needs to be talked about separately. We thought of including the Nia Jax-Reginald situation here, but that seems to make perfect sense with WWE consistently booking Jax into lose-lose situations. Bliss has won both women's titles on the main roster, and is a former Money in the Bank winner, not to mention an electric talker, showing how expertly she can manipulate a crowd. Bliss became a part of the Bray Wyatt trajectory and was one of the most intriguing parts of his character this year, though she has been struggling without Bray and doesn't look like a genuine wrestler at the moment. The end of her partnership with Wyatt was unsatisfying, and her current status exists as a gimmicky talent that walks around with a demonic doll. While we need to see how her feud with Shayna Baszler plays out, the booking of Bliss after the momentum she has generated heading into Mania has vanished. The struggle WWE have in promoting tag teams not named the New Day or the Usos in the last decade is mind-boggling. WWE have been releasing a lot of their full-time tag teams in the last few years, including The Revival, The Good Brothers, Authors of Pain, and more. Tag belts are passed around with a lot of temporary makeshift teams having month-long reigns that leave on impact to the division. We are currently headed towards one of those situations with the pairing of Randy Orton and Matt Riddle. WWE have disbanded many of their teams, including The Bar, Heavy Machinery, New Day, and others for no good reason. The titles those divisions get on their brands have been disrespected for way too long, as this seems to be getting worse. What is NXT now? It was a game show at the start of the 2010s, then replaced Florida Championship Wrestling as their primary developmental show. Superstars that define today's WWE came out from that NXT that ballooned in popularity every year. However, as NXT kept growing, WWE's mismanagement of NXT talent on the main roster kept growing as well. This led to many wrestlers, Tommaso Ciampa, Johnny Gargano, and Adam Cole, electing to not leave the black and gold brand. But what is NXT's role in WWE now? The talent conveyor belt has slowed down, with not many getting called up. NXT keeps expanding itself and now has shows like NXT UK, but WWE not acknowledging them as more than a tertiary brand has left NXT in limbo. While this may not be a massive bother to many, it makes no sense why WWE has the pay-per-view schedule it does. The 2000s saw WWE use generic, mean-sounding names to make their pay-per-view headlines like Armageddon, No Mercy, and Unforgiven, though the PG era has seen a greater reliance on gimmick pay-per-views. Match types like Hell in a Cell, TLC, Elimination Chamber, and Money in the Bank now have dedicated pay-per-views. WWE have been consistent in how they have timed these events, but that has changed over the last few years. This year we saw the post-Mania June pay-per-view of Extreme Rules be moved all the way to October, and the October staple of Hell in a Cell took place in June. February is clogged with pay-per-views, with the Elimination Chamber usually occurring with 2 weeks around Fastlane, creating muddled storytelling in a pay-per-view that nobody has ever been excited for. The gimmick pay-per-views are not going to go anywhere, but with the addition of special shows and the impending return to the Saudi Arabian events, these pay-per-views are going to get a lot harder to find consistency in. Jackson Riker made a controversial comment during the Black Lives Matter movement last year. The backlash from that made WWE pull the Forgotten Sons from TV, with Steve Cutler and Wesley Blake being released not long after. Their main roster run was ruined by Riker, who kept his job to the chagrin of many. It would be easy for the company to leverage that negative attention to build Riker up as a heel if they wanted to, but instead they went and made a wrestler with nuclear negative heat into a face he will now be feuding with Elias, who is supposed to be the heel in this story, but most cheer for him. In a year of decisions that don't make sense on the surface, this one takes the cake. And these were 10 things in WWE that make no sense. I hope you're all having a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.